Yo, the name is Alpern. I've been meaning to do a quick summary of each faction's meta for some time now, though motivation has been a bit lacking on my end. Now this summary will also probably be obsolete quite soon, as there is news of new updates happening sometime mid to late February. However, past that patch, this video can simply be used for some record keeping. Now I won't specify build orders here either, but just point at units and teching paths, as well as battle groups that are strong enough and used often enough to justify calling them meta. This summary is also mainly for 1v1s, as there is too many variables in team games to really give a quick summary. Let us begin with the USF faction. Now for the USF, there is mainly two battle groups that see the most play: Airborne and Armored. Armored is utilizing the opening 0 CP abilities such as Veteran Cruise and Fast Deploy to use for light vehicles. This is quite iconically used by starting with a double Jeep opener after constructing the Tier 1, allowing them to be built extremely fast as well as capture territory. Generally followed up by a few rifles before getting the infantry support center and rushing out a Greyhound from Tier 3 as fast as possible. For light vehicles, it doesn't stop there, and usually the game ends with the late game composition consisting of multiple Greyhounds and Chaffees, and sometimes given the opportunity you can use Seek and Destroy to end the game. For support center upgrades, it's not rare to see the Demolition package, using the Demolition charges near heavy cover on points to get very easy wipes on important points later in the game. Now Airborne has a few more variations when it comes to teching, dependent on both player preference as well as the faction matchups. There are openers, which goes Pathfinders into Tier 1 and Riflemen, and followed by Infantry Support Center with heavy Rifleman tech for bars and Infantry Support Center upgrades. This is then followed up by rushing straight to Tier 4 in order to field Dozer Shermans and Hellcats. For anti-tank, you can get the anti-tank gun power drop from the battle group in order to survive until Tier 4, where you then slowly overtake armor presence. Another variation is going heavy machine guns, sometimes even using the heavy MG drop, and then going into Tier 2 to get Suka squads for anti-tank, specifically versus DAC. Such an opener usually relies quite heavily on paratroopers as mainline, with scouts giving vision for your machine guns, Suks and paradropped 80 guns. This build actually often goes Tier 4 as well, getting Hellcats and Dozers, but it's not unusual to see motor pool here either to simply end the game with pressure using the Greyhounds. All USF builds generally do see a medical tent constructed within the first 8 minutes of a game, simply due to the heavy infantry use as well as the manpower recover ability. Now if we are to move on to Wehrmacht, the most used battle group by a rather substantial margin is the new Italian Coastal Reserves battle group. The main reason here is really the Coastal Reserves themselves, as they prove to have decent matchups buck for buck compared to early allied compositions. This is sometimes used together with a Kettenkrad, but more commonly than not, you open with a few Pioneers to capture territory instead of the Ketten, as the Pioneers are less fragile compared to a Ketten versus mines, and the Pioneers do better versus the double Jeeps that are so common to face at the start. The best teching path after getting Tier 1 is most definitely Tier 2, going for a quick Jaeger squad, perhaps even a flak gun, before getting Tier 2.5 and massing Verbals with Marders, arriving very quickly at a late game composition of Verbals, Jaegers and Marders, with the Pioneers and Reserves as utility and backup. Since you go very heavy into Tier 2, you usually also get the Tier 2 office quarters quite early in a match. Now it's actually quite rare to build the healing from the HQ for this, as a healing bunker in your base is a lot better long-term investment, healing faster than the HQ heal and being better for manpower economy, similar to how the USF heal tent functions. However, you do also have the better tempo option of dropping the Designate Defensive Line ability on a somewhat safe but aggressive point, allowing you to both heal infantry and vehicles passively, as well as giving combat bonuses. This does, however, vary in efficiency quite a lot, dependent on the map, and it ranges from absurd tempo to sometimes becoming a bit too restrictive in your unit placements. Make sure in the late game also to make heavy use of coastal wall, giving you cheaper mines, especially since coastals can plant them very fast. For UKF, all 3 battle groups do see quite a bit of play, but in order to restrict myself, I'd favor the armored one as meta, simply due to being the better one keeping up with tempo. Generally opening up with tier 1 with varying amount of sections before getting the infantry training upgrade. The main differences here is really what upgrades you get for these sections. Boys AT can get you quite far given that you have enough of them, and coupled with snares they can hold off versus a lot of the commonly fielded Axis vehicles. But versus some specific vehicles you do sometimes take for anti-tank guns, and after 280 guns you often follow up with getting the support cruise training upgrade. Stewards do see quite a bit of play if you have already teched for the 80 guns, which you can then even requisition using the battle group ability for AA Crusaders once you unlock them. Other than that, the AA Crusader is your main go-to vehicle, and it's not at all unusual that the composition ends here, simply massing sections, AA Crusaders and 80 guns. But sometimes the Churchill does see play, however it can be quite tough to really utilize versus the common and super cost efficient Martyr, so getting more AA Crusaders to close the game is very often the optimal choice. If there is a lack of Martyrs, there's always the option to requisition the AA Crusaders too and get Churchills instead, meaning that you're not really digging a hole for yourself even if you acquire too many of the Crusaders. Somewhere around after the first Crusader, make sure you also get the vehicle training to boost their performance. And finally we got the DAC Black Horse, where the 2 Italian battle groups are the most used, Italian Combined Arms and Italian Infantry. Italian Infantry often opens up with some Panzergrens and a 250 to use as a flame half-track with the Panzer Pioneer, looking for aggressive engagements in order to obtain command points as fast as possible to get the double L6 call-in unlocked. You generally have tier 1 teched at this time, potentially getting an Assault Grenadier before unlocking the L6. And the L6 call-ins can then be used together with the call-in Panzerjäger to often beat out light vehicle rushes such as a Greyhound. Guastatori isn't really super uncommon to see either if the game drags long enough. Other than that, getting a Flak Fearling before teching tier 2 into Martyrs and potentially Stug Ds is the late game composition, though this battle group often wins or loses way before this stage is reached. You don't use a lot of infantry for these builds, so often 250 healing is enough, as games don't really drag out long enough to motivate getting the healing track. For the Italian Combined Arms, however, you generally just field multiple Bersaglierists before taking for a Flak Fearling and a field track, as well as Panzerjägers to babysit the Flak Fearling versus potential light vehicles. If you have enough manpower, getting a vehicle upgrade such as smokes before massing Caro Armatas means you're in a really decent position, and if the opponent somehow is managing to mass a lot of vehicles, taking for Martyrs is favorable once you have a decent armada of Caros, where you then use the Caros for heavy lifting and Martyrs to protect for dives. And that's a quick summary of my perception of the meta. For more specific builds, I do recommend checking out Cohdb, where you can see the specific builds players use by clicking on an uploaded replay. Now let's cross our fingers, there's some great news to be revealed for us mid-February for Company Heroes 3, and in the meantime, thank you for watching.